I hope everyone's doing well and being safe with the virus and all the things that are happening. So I hope you guys are all well. I thought I'd just open up with a brief statement and feel compelled to sort of talk about sort of where things are right now. I know that I like so many of you, like so many other people across this great nation, are I've been heartbroken and saddened at all the recent events in our society. The recent deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and so much more. And so, as I sit there at night and I watch the news with my kids, I have a 15-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, I have a 4-year-old about to turn 5. It's really clear to me, and I can't speak for other people. I can always only speak for me. But what's clear to me is that history will look back at where we stood in this time, and I know that my kids, when little Leona's in college, 16 years from now or whatever it is, 15 years from now, 14 years from now, they'll look back at this time and this place, and they'll want to know where their father stood and where their mother stood. Our grandkids will want to know where we stood in this time. And, that's a tremendous thing to think about. And I know what it means for me is that, I can't shy away from this moment. And I don't think any of us can shy away from this moment. It is time for a fundamental change in our societies. It's time for a fundamental change in the way that we do things. And I certainly don't have all the answers. But I know as for me and for my house and for the way that I do things, it's up to me to find every which way that I can have a fundamental change. It's important that we make statements, but it's really important that those statements lead to discourse, which eventually leads to action. And, I can say for me, I've tried to be honest and open with the guys on our team and with my friends, with my family. And, I think it's really important at this time that we engage and participate in this discussion on both times. When you're talking about something like racism, and I'm certainly no expert, I don't mean to pretend to have answers, but I have this opportunity to share what I think. If you want to fix this, you can't fix it from one side. We need to have a discourse. And I know as a white man, sometimes it can be daunting to talk about issues like racism. And to be quite honest, we can sometimes be fearful that if we say the wrong thing, that we could, be seen the wrong, be seen a way that we don't really feel it. But we have to step up. We have to step up. I was telling someone earlier today, like I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and so many years ago, he said, that he sang so eloquently, the times they are a changing, but you sit there and say, have they really? And if they haven't changed and it appears they haven't, when you turn on the news, then it's time for a change. And, as white men, as white women, as white people, we might sometimes feel afraid to participate in the discussion, but it's time for us to do so. And it's time for us also to do so by not telling our Black brothers and sisters or people of any ethnic group how they should feel. It's time for us to listen, and it's time for us to empathize, and in any which way that we can to engage and talk and find ways for that discourse to someday lead to action. I think so many of us know that like overt racism is easy to spot, and we see it and we know that it's wrong. We know that it's hateful, and we say, hey, I don't feel that way. But what's gripping our country is systemic racism. And to me, it must be rooted out at every turn. And that's all of our jobs, to admit that, we do see color. We do see differences, to not sit there and say, hey, we don't see that. It's there, and our society needs all of us at every turn to find ways to root it out. And I think, the first step, as I said, is discourse, is conversation, is listening, but all that has to someday lead to action. And I'll say this, I'm proud of our team. I'm proud of, the guys that have gone out and have used their voices, have used their influence to try to make change. Not all of us as one single person, we can't always make this huge fundamental change, but we can make small change. And whether it's guys in peaceful protests, whether it's guys out walking, whether it's guys turning to social media, whether it's guys out cleaning up the street, Reggie out cleaning up the streets of Louisville yesterday, I'm proud to be associated with those people. So, as I said, I never want to come across like I have all the answers, because I have very few. But I do know that as for me and my house and the things that I would like to see myself move forward, I want to look back sometime and have my kids and my grandkids say, my mom and dad, they were on the right side of history, and it's time for a change. I'll see if you guys have any questions for me with that being said.
Matt, along those lines, what have you told the team? And kind of, I'm sure it was a similar message, but have you done anything team-wide on this topic and during these times?
Yeah, on Friday, we were actually scheduled to have a guest speaker, have a kind of comedian come in. And, I just addressed the team briefly and just said, it didn't feel like now was the time to get up there and start laughing and those kinds of things. So, I talked for a few minutes, and I thought it was important also to talk about the issues, and so I've talked with the team several times about the issues. And when I say talk with them, it's not my job to tell other people how to feel. I think what I've done is just said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I feel. I want you guys all to know that I respect your voices. I want to have a team full of men that know that their purpose in life is not just to play football. And so when I look out and I see Shaq, or I see Trey, or I see Chris, or I see Ian, I see those guys. I see Andre out, joining protesters. I wanted them to know that I support them with whatever they do. And, we don't always have to agree on little things on topics, you know what I mean? But we all have to understand that we're going to have different visions and different mindsets. But I want our guys to use their voices. And I want them to know that they can always come to me with anything. And I want them to know that I certainly know that I'm not perfect, and so I'm trying to figure this out. I think we're all trying to figure things out. So that's kind of been it. And then, we have a player impact committee, that's headed up by Chris Manhertz and Andre Smith, and they've done a lot of things in the past. We just talked about that yesterday. Just said, hey, if other guys want to get involved, whether it's now, whether it's in the future, we want to make that something that, is run by the players. It's not run by the coaches, obviously, but we've addressed that as well. So I think it's just been conversation, and it's really just been being there for each other. As I said, as a white man sitting there talking to Shaq, what's the best thing I can do? The best thing I can do is listen. I can't understand what it's like to have racism pressed against me. I can try to understand, but I can't understand. The best I can do, though, is listen to guys who have dealt with it and allow me to understand where they're coming from, so I can better understand what they're saying, so I can make changes in my life, if that makes sense. So I think just that discourse has been the things that we do.
David Newton here. Have you done anything personally? I know you've seen some players out protesting. Have you done anything personally to show your stance on this?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the first step for us was the statement we made as a team on Saturday, and I was really proud to be associated with David Tepper in that time. At a time where a lot of people think releasing statements. It's easy for people to say, hey, we don't like racism, but I thought for our statement to come from our organization, to come from Tom Glick and Marty Herney and myself and Mr. Tepper. What I thought was great was Mr. Tepper made sure that the player impact committee and our players were engaged and involved. And that was a statement from all of us. And to talk about Mr. Floyd, to talk about his death, I thought was important. And to honor him in that small way. So I think the first step was that, supporting our players as they go to protest. As I said, even Reggie down in Louisville yesterday. And then, I think moving forward for me, making that statement, now sitting here and addressing these issues with you. But the next thing is action, is what's going to come next. And I really feel like, the protests are great, but they're the beginning. They're only the beginning. The protests and people making their voices heard, peaceful protesters in the street, they're bringing awareness to the issue. But what happens next? And I'll be honest with you, David, I'm trying to figure out, if I had I have so much respect for Coach Lynn at the Chargers, and he said it yesterday so eloquently. I want to do more than just talk. So, and he was saying, I don't know what that is yet. And that hit me. So I think we're all here in the organization. I think we're all trying to figure out, hey, what can we do? Because we can't look back in 10 years and say nothing great came from this. It can't happen. So how can I do that? So I think my wife and I are trying to figure that out for our kids. But I think part of that is having my kids sit there and watch protests, having my kids sit there, having my kids watch the death of Mr. Floyd. It can't just be something that they don't feel, you know what I mean? And that might be hard to sit there and show, a 5-year-old daughter that happening, but that's what happened. You know what I'm saying? So I need my kids to see that. So, so anyway, that's a lot to say, I'm just figuring it out.
Follow up on that, you guys moved on from Eric Reed. Obviously, with his protest of kneeling, do you see that as becoming a bigger part of the NFL moving forward? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, everywhere I've been, I've always supported our players when they've decided to make statements. And so, players making a statement in whatever way that they do it, whether it's with their voice, whether it's on social media, to me, I've never had an issue with that. And so I don't know where people will turn moving forward, but as I move forward, I want to make sure our players understood that I'm going to always support them. When you make a statement, there's always a responsibility, right, behind that. And so I think, that's why I'm very careful with the statements that I make. I think we have really great leaders on our team who are going to do things that mean something and do it the right way.
I'm just curious, if you don't mind sharing, what specifically did you talk to your kids about, and was that at all similar to the conversations you had with players? What were those conversations like?
I think I talk to my kids on obviously a much different level. With when I'm talking to my kids, I'm telling them this is how we think. I don't tell players how to think. When I talk to the players, I talk about this is where I'm coming from. I can't tell you where you're coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. But when I talk to my kids, I want to make sure they understand what this means. And when you talk to the kids, they have a tendency just to keep asking why. And that's what's the hard thing about this, right? I can't answer why. I can't say, why did this man die? Well, why? I can't answer that. But, as I said, I think what's important with my kids is that they understand that, hey, this is what our family believes. And, I think all of us in this time, we've been, stay at home for months now. I mean, I've tried to use this as a time to improve myself, improve myself as a coach, improve myself as a father, improve myself as a husband and family man, as a son. I mean, there's so many things in my life that have been brought to light, improve my health. This is a time really for introspection because, the day-to-day grind of going to work has all been gone. And so a lot of things in my own personal life, I've been like, hey, I need to change this. I need to improve that. And so I think just being honest with my kids right now is an important thing.
Matt, how do you think that being an off-the-field leader, whether it's protests, whether it's getting involved in the community, can translate to on-the-field leadership?
Well, I think it takes courage to lead. It takes courage to act. We talk about like being a leader in the locker room, you're being a football leader, there's a lot of courage that goes with that, because you have to be willing, when you're a player, you have to be willing to know that, hey, you're going to mess up at some point, and so that's the hardest thing for players is they sometimes don't want to be, lead and tell other guys what to do because they know eventually they're going to make a mistake on the field and they don't, and I think it takes tremendous courage to step out of your comfort zone and say, hey, guys, let's go this way, let's go that way. So I think, when guys do that off the field, and whatever issues they have, whether it's battling, the coronavirus, whether it's issues of racism, defeating racism in our country, whatever the issues are that they stand up for, I think that takes courage. And, at the end of the day, if I can go back to one thing I said, I really believe in, it's when players understand that football isn't their purpose in life. It's their passion. It might be their gift, but it's not their purpose. And so when they understand that, I'm a coach. I love the coach, but it's not my purpose in life. And so when we understand that, then it makes things way bigger than just, hey, I got to just worry about football. So again, I'm just supporting every player that we have with whatever decisions they make, not just right now in this instance, but in all the things that they decide to do in their lives, the foundations and organizations and, community service, all the things that they do.
Good to talk to you, man. When it comes to leading, you said it takes courage and it takes some guts to kind of step out and take that first step of faith. Is that harder for you being in a new city like Charlotte? Have you found that you want to be cautious with that, or you don't really know how to approach it, or how has that been different for you just because you're new?
Oh, I mean, I think when I was saying that, I was referring to the players, kind of on the field. I think for me, I think my job is to lead, the team and the coaching staff as best I can. So, I'll take this time, this 30 minutes with you guys. We'll release a statement, but it's the day in, day out interactions I have with our players and our coaches and our staff, obviously that will lead to the things will happen on the field football wise, and then hopefully, off the field as well. So, I think for me, we moved into our house on a Saturday, and then on a Wednesday we were stay at home. I haven't really been back to the office since. So this is such a unique time, where I don't know much other than just kind of what I know right now. But so but I want to make it clear, when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about the guys on the field. Now, that being said, for me, I think, as I said earlier, as a white man, you can sometimes be a little bit cautious to speak out on issues like racism. And on the other turn, sometimes you can be too preachy, saying this is what I think. This is a time, though, for everyone to engage in the discourse that could lead to action.
Matt, Steve Reed from the Associated Press. From a football perspective, I mean, how strange or how tough has this transition been? I mean, it's hard enough going from coaching college to coaching the NFL, but I mean, dealing with the coronavirus, everything virtually, I think you haven't gotten to see a whole lot of players. I just wonder if you can talk about how strange this transition has been to the NFL and what you're doing to try to, get this team competitive for this year.
Well, it's certainly there's no playbook for this time, and it's not like you can call up the other NFL head coaches and commiserate and say, hey, how are you guys handling this? It's kind of you have to kind of figure it out on your own. So I think those have obviously all been challenges. As you guys have heard me say, I think I've probably met 20 of the 90 players on our team as we've gone through like the draft, as we've gone through, even as you have to make roster decisions now. It's really hard to make informed decisions when you haven't even met the player, you know what I mean? Like, you haven't seen, where they are. So those things are all hard. But I do think, every development has two sides. The players have heard me say that 1,000 times. And so, I think this is an opportunity, just like I talked about to Elena's question, for me as a person to find things I can be better at. I think it's made us all better as coaches and as teachers. I think a lot of our players have learned really well virtually. I think they've really bought it, a lot of these guys are growing up with with a lot of technology in their hands from a young age. So getting different apps and modalities to teach, I think, is really is kind of down a lot of these guys' sweet spots. It's how they communicate. So as coaches, you got Coach Snow. He's adapted to this, and so maybe we're becoming better teachers. And then there's a lot of really experienced NFL head coaches, and they have a formula for success that they've been doing for a long time. And this has sort of changed their paradigm as well. So all of us, we're all on an even playing field as coaches in terms of figuring out how to manage this. Now, the biggest issue obviously is just I haven't met enough of the guys. I haven't seen them practice. I haven't seen them run. I don't know what kind of condition they're in. But that's why you build a roster full of guys that you trust, so that that they're out there working hard, on their own, staying in shape. So then we finally do come together. Hopefully, all the teaching that we've done can come together with the physical part.
Did you reach out to players, obviously, after everything started to unfold with protests across the country, or was it a matter of them reaching out to you, or was this a matter of players just saying, they feel called to participate and make their voices heard in this moment?
Yeah, so I had the conversation with the players on Friday. As kind of that conversation I talked about earlier in terms of just saying, hey, canceling the meeting and just sort of offering some of my, my initial thoughts, as a man. And then a lot of players reached out to me after that on Friday, in terms of guys going to, and then that was where I said, hey, I support you, how you use your voice. Right. So I think guys going to protests and walks on Monday has been on their own. And, they obviously haven't checked in with me or anything. They've gone and done what they feel they needed to do. I've obviously had some personal conversations with some guys who've reached out to me as time has gone on. And, every conversation is different. And like I said, I'm just trying to support guys and some guys have, suffered some things, in some of the things that have happened across the country, though they're dealing with different things. So I'm just trying to be there for those guys. But yeah, Friday was the day that I talked about it. And then since then, just some small conversations.
Hey, Coach, I wanted to get to something yesterday that came down. Luke Kuechly, he officially was put on the reserve retired list. And then we see the website put out about an hour ago that he's considering a career in scouting. I'm just interested in what that relationship looks like and what conversations you've had with Luke about his future.
Yeah, and that, obviously being in pro scouting, that would, that falls under Marty. I've had a great relationship with Luke in the times that I've been around him. He's my neighbor, so that, sometimes I'm out walking and he'll drive by and way to go do something. I'll see him. But I think it's great if it works out. If it's what he wants to do. I know as anytime a player gets done playing, they're trying to figure out what they want to do next. So if it works out where he can be a pro scout, and obviously the pro side are the guys that are evaluating other NFL players, and they really are. Their mission is twofold. They're helping us build the roster by finding other guys that fit what we do, and they're also providing us advanced scouting each week on the opponent. And if there's someone that was built for that, it's probably Luke Kuechly with his preparation and work. So I certainly hope it works out. I think Luke's a great person. Forget about who he was as a player, right? He's a great person that has a tremendous mind for the game based upon the way that he played. But he's got to figure out what's right for him. And since the very first day, he told me, hey, that he wasn't going to play. My advice to him has always been, hey, do what's right for you. He's given a lot to Boston College, the Carolina Panthers, and the game of football. So I want to make sure he does what's right for him.
Hey, Coach, the league and the team made the announcement about training camp not being at Wofford, and obviously teams nowhere can travel. I'm curious, and I know everything is subject to change, but have you guys gone into the planning stages as to what a practice would look like under COVID-19 conditions? And can you share any of it? And thanks for your time.
Yes, absolutely. And, so obviously that came out yesterday. So I know we're putting together plans to host everything here. And obviously that relationship with Wofford is really important to us. And obviously that relationship with, having a chance to go down to South Carolina and go to the fans was really important with us. But obviously there's some bigger issues here. So we look forward to that, getting back to that, hopefully next year. But I think as it stands now, we're in the planning stages now of, hey, how do we make it work here? How do we meet and be socially distanced while we meet? Do we meet in different parts of the stadium? The practice is one thing, really. The meetings, the locker rooms, all those things are a whole other. So, we're in the process of just trying to figure out how to make all those things work, to be quite honest with you. And Sean Paddon's our director of football administration, he's a guy that, figures out how to get things done. Eddie Levins, Mark Hart. We just have, JD Rest, Todd Green, just a bunch of great people that are trying to figure out all those things. And then in terms of practices, I think as with anything, as we get closer to the time, more information will come out. The NFL maybe will give us some guidelines. Obviously, we can't practice. We had planned to practice with another team. We can't do that. So, as I said earlier, I think my job is to be the most flexible head coach, and we have the most flexible staff we've ever had. But, I don't know how you socially distance at football practice, and maybe they'll say this is how you have to do it. But, in the locker room, in the meeting rooms, we have a whole stadium. We're fortunate that we actually, work in our stadium, so there's a lot of room. We're in the process now of trying to figure out, what do we need to buy? What do we need to do? How do we make this work? So it's a kind of a ongoing process.
Hey, Matt, we haven't talked to you since you all signed Eli Apple last week. What kind of went into that decision? What did you guys see, and what are you hoping he brings to the team?
Well, Eli was a guy that we targeted going all the way back to free agency, and I'm glad that it eventually worked out. And I think the thing about Eli is he has elite traits. He's 6'1", he's strong, he's 4'3". He has all the traits, to be a great player. And our job now is to put it all together with him. And I think his best football is ahead of him. I think that his talent and hopefully his approach will match well with the way that we do things and the way that we want to play. And, if it works out, I think between he and Dante Jackson and the rest of the guys we drafted, the rest of the guys we have on the roster, that could be a strength for us. So obviously haven't been around Eli yet, haven't had a chance to meet Eli yet, but I liked talking with him. And as I said, I think his best football is ahead of him. And, one of my goals as a head coach is to always have players say, hey, I played my best football under that staff. And I have so much confidence in Evan Cooper as our corners coach and in Jason Simmons as our secondary coach / passing game coordinator that they know that they knew that Eli was a guy that they wanted. So I feel like we can have him play his best football under us.
I did want to start, or at least circle back to where you started, where you talked about the most important thing that you can do right now is listen. What are you hearing your guys say?
Well, I hear my guys saying that there's an issue and that there's a problem, and that it's deeply, deeply, deeply affecting them. And I hear some of the guys on my staff are some of my best friends, and I hear them saying to me, Coach, you have to understand, or even one of the players says to me, like the fear that I have of letting my son get in the car and go out somewhere. That's so hard as a man, just as a man, as a father to hear. And, I don't know that, I don't have that fear necessarily. And so I think all of us, I think law enforcement, I think society, I think everyone would say that, hey, this isn't right. that people have this fear. African-American people, Black people have this fear that we don't have. And so when I talked to Jeff Nixon, who him and I were high school teammates and have been best friends for a long time, and he's sending his son William off to college. When I talked to Frisman Jackson, when I talked to Evan Cooper, when I talked to, Tahir Whitehead, who I knew when he was 18 years old and is now a father of 4. Those are things that affect me, because nothing's more important in my life than my kids. And so, as I said, I don't have all the answers. But I think hearing that and then starting to say, okay, what can I do? What can we do? I think are the first steps. And I want to make sure I say this again. It just can't stop there. It has to lead to action, which leads to change. And so you hope that, as I said, you hope that it's time, and it's time for something to get started, that we look back in 10 years when our kids are, as I talked about our kids sitting in history classes, when they look back, they talk about, the change that came from this, not just the time that this was. So that would be the things that I hear the most.
Matt, if you might indulge just a couple football questions, wondering if you could say who that other team you were considering practicing with was, and then we haven't gotten you since you signed Schofield, and what do you think the depth chart at guard looks like?
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem if I say that. I never know if I'm gonna get in trouble with the rules. I'm trying to figure all this out as I go. But yeah, we were going to have conversations, I think, with the Ravens, because we're playing them on a Sunday. It made sense to go up there. They're a physical team, and John Harbaugh's a guy that I have so much respect for. When we beat Penn State when I was at Temple, I came in the next day and I had a voicemail on my office phone. I never met John Harbaugh before. And he left me a message just saying, hey, I watched the game with my kids. I asked around, got your number, and how much I respected that game. It was pretty cool, right? So I just thought it'd be a great thing for our team to go see, go up there and play them. But so obviously not going to happen. And then, Sko to me is a guy that can play tackle, can play guard. He's played for Pat Meyer. He's now the third guy on our roster that's played for Pat as our offensive line coach. Johnny Miller was with him. Sko was with him, and Russell was with him. And to me, he's a guy who's still young, as an offensive lineman. He's really, really smart, really tough, and brings a ton of versatility. So I think we like, where we are at guard. I think, we feel like we have great competition. We see Dennis Daly as a guy that really played well at times last year, and his best, football is right there in front of him. So I think those guys give us a great competition at the position. And another guy that was on the roster last year, when you go back and watch the tape, that we say, hey, you know what, he's got a chance to be a pretty good player, a really good player. If we can do it right on our end, is Chris Reed. And obviously we signed Johnny. So, I feel good about that position. We have some young guys, and we have some vets that all can get in there and battle it out.
Matt, I was curious what the rest of your virtual training, whatever this is, looks like over the next couple weeks, how long you see that going, and if players are allowed back in the facility for training camp, when you're planning on getting them in the facility.
So, we know that the offseason program is scheduled to go to the 26th. What we know is this week is virtual and next week is virtual. Then I'm sure we'll find out about the following 2 weeks. Are they allowed back in the building, or certain guys allowed back in the building, or is it still virtual? So we'll plan on it being virtual and then adapt, if we're, and be excited if they actually come back in. And then, as we're scheduled right now, I think training camp's scheduled to start on like the 28th. You have the option to bring rookies in 7 days early, quarterbacks and injured players 5 days early. I know some teams haven't done that in the past. We certainly will do that. I think one of the great challenges, Elena, this year will be to get guys practice ready, right? Like there's a certain level that you want to practice at, but you actually have to get guys to be practice ready. So it'll take maybe even getting a couple days on the front end to make sure guys are in shape so that we don't pull hamstrings, and those things will be really important. So, those are the dates we know now. And I know every day that something could change, and I appreciate that. And I don't complain about it. I just kind of deal with it.
You've spoken just then about Tahir Whitehead, and obviously you've known him for a while, and you've spoken before about what he brings sort of off the field as a leader. Could you speak a little bit about what he brings on the field and how he fits into what you want to do defensively? Yeah,
to me, he's played will linebacker for the majority of his career, but we think has the strength to be a Mike as well. And, I think he brings tremendous attention to detail and toughness, and really fits us. We're going to be more of a one gap system, and so what we need guys who can get downhill fast, play really fast, defend the run. There's a lot of analytics out there that say, hey, the run game doesn't really matter, but you go back and look at last year, obviously, our not stopping the run affected the Panthers. So finding a guy like Tahir who can match up in coverage, but who also is a really outstanding run defender was really important to us. So I think, between he and Shaq and then some of the other young guys that we have some veterans and then some young guys as well.
Matt, obviously a lot dealing with the present and the future. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about maybe in the past, your time at Western Carolina and what that helped, teach you about being a coach, and maybe some lessons that you may have taken from there.
Well, I loved Western Carolina. I absolutely loved living in Cullowhee, Silva. I loved the players that I met there were awesome. I recruited like once you kind of hit like, I guess Shelby, Gastonia, all the way through, the east side of Charlotte, and then down through, Gaffney, Rock Hill, down all the way to, I used to stay at the Microtel in Rock Hill. What's it called? Apple Park or Orchard Park or Cherry Park or something. Back when I was an avid runner, I'd run in the park in the morning. Not so much anymore, and then up through Spartanburg and Greenville. So I had that area of recruiting. But I worked for Kent Briggs, who was a great man, still is a great man, and loved the university, was an alum. Jeff Collins, who's the head coach of Georgia Tech, was the defensive coordinator, and he got me hired there. And he obviously followed me as the head coach at Temple and is now at Georgia Tech. Some great assistant coaches we had come through there, Clayton White, Alan Mogridge, Brent Key, who are big names in college football right now. So, a great staff, great town, but I really love those players. I get my haircut now by a young man named Pat. Not this one. I did this one myself with my Clippers. Before this, I got my haircut by Pat Leach, who is a barber up in the north part of Charlotte. Played for us there. I mean, just so many great people that I met while I was there. So I think Cullowhee is a great town. Western North Carolina is filled with great people, and I love the football. A lot of teams now have moved on to Division I, but I loved going to App State or having App State come to us and playing for the Mountain Jug. I didn't love going to Georgia Southern, but they were a sight to see, running the triple option back in the day. So really great football at the time, Firm and Wofford, all those teams. But I really I learned a lot from Coach Briggs, and I learned a lot with the coaches I worked with.
Matt, I know you guys be on the field for 3 months after you thought you would start on April 6th is a pretty significant challenge in the NFL as a new coach with a new quarterback, new staff, a lot of new players. How do you view that challenge, and how do you impress upon your players what kind of challenge that is for you guys as a team and as a franchise?
Well, it really presents three challenges to the team. One is in terms of camaraderie and getting to know each other. One of the best parts about football is the locker room. We're at a time where we're talking about racial divide and all those things. The locker room is just is such a great place where so many different people that play different positions, different sizes, different races, from the east, from the north, from the south, from the west, all come together. So I think that camaraderie we're having to kind of build virtually. I think the second part is just, as I talked about, just making sure guys are in shape, just the injury factor. Now, the great news is you go back and look at the lockout year, and the injuries that year didn't really spike. So I think, sometimes maybe this rest will be good. But then the third thing is really just, timing and throwing and catching the ball and all those things. So I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to say that, one of the hardest things about being a great football player, or one of the hardest things about playing in a new system is, you have to think. And so we're taking this time as coaches. I don't want to mail it in. I'm really challenging our coaches, and our coaches are challenging themselves to teach the system. I talk about the 4 levels of learning to our guys, and trying to get to level 4 of mastery of this system, trying to get our guys to master the system so that when we do get together and the physical part starts, that we're in shape enough to prevent injuries and allow us to practice, that we can spend time together, but most importantly, that we don't have to spend a lot of time learning the system, right? That we can go out there and perfect our craft, not learn our craft. So these meetings, this virtual time, any extra work that guys do, I think it's all really important for them. And so I think when you have to coach virtually, one thing I'll say, you have to really prepare the meeting, right? You have to prepare your PowerPoint or your cut up, and you'd like to think guys do that at other times. But, you're in meetings, and, a 30-minute meeting when you got 10 guys in the room and has a tendency to go for 45 minutes. And, you're kind of walking from here and commuting to here. And so here with us being in our homes, I think the level of detail in the PowerPoints and cut-ups and meetings has greatly improved. And so that's our plan, to be quite honest. That's the challenges, and that's our plan as we've attacked this offseason.
Hey, Matt, I know you guys had some contact with Charlotte Motor Speedway and with NASCAR. One, being in the home of NASCAR, nice to have seen just some sports back, albeit NASCAR for you. And then also, did you learn anything that Charlotte Motor Speedway did in order for you guys to implement at your facilities, the distancing or whatnot?
Yeah, I haven't had any. I haven't been involved in those things. That would probably be Sean and Eddie and those guys. And I know, Eddie's Eddie Levins, who's been real, and Mark Carter, been on the forefront of all the different things that are out there in terms of, from testing to cleaning to, to distance. And so, that really hasn't come across my necessarily desk yet. What I've been trying to do is just figure out, because, when you start talking about, hey, we're going to have to distance, or, hey, we're going to, have to test, it starts to affect schedules and those things. So I'm just trying to build out a lot of different templates of, hey, is this going to work? Or, is that, how can I make this work? So I'm trying to stay in my lane right now, but I know those guys are doing a great job with it.
Have you taken in any NASCAR? Has that been something? Had you beforehand?
Yeah, I took my family down to Daytona. We went to the 500, the one that got rained out, so we saw 20 laps. So, upon moving here, Ty Dillon was one of the first guys that really reached out to me. And so we were his guests down at the Daytona 500, and he's become a friend. I consider him a great guy. The Joe Gibbs racing team, I met one of their young guys there. And so they've when this is all said and done, we look forward to getting out there. I had a chance to go on Kevin Harvick's show. So I'm an avid NASCAR fan. My son, who's over here right now, we watch Race Hub. We watch the races, I'm a little more ADD. I kind of go back and forth, whereas he sits there and studies the screen. So, as you get to know different guys and different drivers, I had one of my former players. His first race was this past Sunday as a I think he's a rear tire changer on the 51 car. So, so there's always, as you get to know people in NASCAR, you start to root for more and more people.
Matt, you said there's no one you can really call to pick your brain on this, but you did reference kind of coming off that lockout year, 9 years ago. Is there anyone from that, time, like Coach Coughlin or anyone that you've picked the brain of?
I haven't talked to Coach Coughlin about it. That's probably someone I should. I talked to Russell Okung, because he was playing at that time. So he brought it up to me. One of the great things about having vets, Marty was around at that time. Kent Johnson, who's our director of wellness, he was a strength coach for 25 years in the NFL. So he has a lot of experience from that time. Rod Marinelli's with a different team, but in the past I've talked to him about that, so I think there's a lot of, and there's a lot of experience on our staff as well. So, we've built our wellness and performance team, and we've also had some great outside consultants who are some of the best in the country. And so it's great for us, for Kent and for Jeremy, our strength coach, and Andrew Altoff, to be able to go to these lead guys and say, hey, hey, what are the best practices for this and for that? So I've tried to utilize our staff quite a bit, as I said, to make sure that we're getting as much information as possible. The best way to do it,
You mentioned with Eli Apple about having the traits you want to look to continue to develop and stuff, but obviously as a guy who's sort of now going into year 5, how do you start to distinguish between those players who have the potential to sort of build upon what they've shown and actually make good on their traits and those who maybe just have hit their ceiling for other reasons?
Yeah, I think you have to look at age. I can't remember what Eli is. I can't remember if he's 24, 25, 26, but he's still in that young, range. And I think, there's obviously you have to look at that when you look at contracts and all that. But once you have a chance to get a guy that you feel like, hey, this is going to work for us, I think you have to really take into account how you see it. You know what I'm saying? And so to me, we're going to ask him to play differently than maybe another team did. We're going to do different things at any position. And so we're always trying to find traits that fit us. There's a big difference between being a zone corner and being a man corner. And you could be a great man corner, but we're going to play a lot of zone and it doesn't fit. And I think we see that a lot of times. We see a lot of free agent corners who are great zone corners go to man teams and struggle. So as we look at, hey, kind of who we want to be, we thought Eli was a fit, as we did with a lot of the other guys. We're going to play offensive line a certain way, so we're looking for a certain thing. There's a lot of other great players who, are going to sign other places. That doesn't mean they fit us, or especially on the D line, we're going to be more of a vertical attacking defensive line. So I think we were always just trying to fit guys who fit our scheme. But if everything works out where it's right for us and right for them, I don't like to judge people based upon their experiences in other systems with other people. I love to see what they do for us if I think they have the traits that we need. And so it's probably the college coach in me feeling like, hey, when you recruit certain traits and then you try to develop them. I think when you get players who are 23, 24, 25, 20, they're still in that stage. Their best football is hopefully ahead of them. When you get to like 29, 30, 31, they are what they've put on tape, but I think, these younger guys, I think we can help them play their best football.
Matt, obviously with a virtual offseason, it's probably harder to keep in contact with people that you're not meeting with necessarily every day. When you're in the building, David Tepper is there. He's around. He can stop by the office and kind of and talk to you. What kind of contact have you had with Dave, and what have you guys been? What's that been like during this virtual time?
Well, I think one of the great things about Mr. Tepper is he's unbelievably accessible. If I need him, I can just text him or call him, and he's right there on the phone. And he's great because he lets me do my job and calls me when he has something for me, and I call him. So if I hear from him, once a day, once every other day, it's there. But the most important thing is I know I can go to him with anything, and I know that I can be frank with him when I talk to him. And that's also how I feel with Marty. I talk to Marty probably 3 times a day, every day anyway. So I think when we were in the office, I would just sit in Marty's office or sit in Samir's office and talk to him. Now I can get on the phone with Marty at any point. So I think the communication piece of this has been great. I really do. I think that I've gotten very used to video. It's almost when I'm on the phone with someone now, it feels weird. I have to put it on speaker, like holding a phone to my ear. It's almost gotten a little bit antiquated to me because I'm so used to this. But I know that I can get on the phone with those guys, and they'll always take my call. So I think the communication has been really good throughout the course of this.
Coach, Mike Solarte here. I know this is all strange, and you say holding the phone is antiquated, and doing these video chats and everything. You're not learning as much as you would from your players being there, but what are you learning about your guys as you go through this process of trying to, I guess, get to know one another and also concentrate on trying to build a football team at the same time?
Well, I think we're learning a lot about. I think we're learning that we have a bunch of guys who work really hard. Like getting into a call on time, being on time, having your screen on, taking notes, answering questions. I think one of the keys to being a great teacher is that you have to constantly assess, right? You have to constantly ask questions and find out what guys know and where they are. And when I ask guys questions, when I talk to them, when I listen to them, I think you see that we have a mature team that's working on the football part of this at a high level. So I think what we can only find out right now is just, guys' work ethic, guys' ability to how much information they can retain, how well they work at it. And as I said, I think one of the things that we've done is we've brought the technology, like if there's a pendulum of like me and then, an 18-year-old or 22-year-old rookie in terms of using technology, instead of asking them to, use paper playbooks like I like, we've come this way, and now I'm using apps and things that I don't really like. But I'm doing it, and I'm finding I like it. I'm finding new ways to do things. So, but I think we're finding guys are hardworking. We're finding out how much guys can learn, how much guys retain, and I'm pleased and I'm very proud with the team. I mean, it's all optional, right? And we have a lot of guys that have taken it really seriously, which I think is really cool.